So I really appreciate that as both a woman and a weirdo. Awful, terrible, like unholy content. Maybe don't read this while you're eating. Just like strap in, honestly. Like, how are we not supposed to laugh at that? Weird effing little book. And that upset me. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I would like to tell you about the best books I have read so far in 2026. I don't know what it is about the first month of the year, but I do feel like January is always a really good reading month for me. I do have somewhat of a curse where usually the first book I read in the year is not good. So this time, what I did is I was reading a book at the end of 2025 and I was like, oh, I'm kind of liking this a lot. And what I did is I just didn't finish it in 2025. So then I finished it shortly after 2026 started. Kind of cheating, but I don't know. I just feel like that it sets the tone for the year and it kind of gives me a jump start and feeling good, coming off of reading a good book. So the first book I read was Rekt by Alex Gonzalez. This was a total blind buy for me. I had never even heard of this, but I don't know, the synopsis was just really interesting to me. And yeah, I ended up liking it a lot. So this is about a man whose girlfriend dies, I think when they're near the end of their college careers. And they were high school sweethearts, and then she gets killed in a car accident, and he just cannot cope with his grief. He really falls down this rabbit hole of the dark web. He kind of becomes addicted to watching basically snuff films, just these videos on the internet of the most gruesome acts being done to people. And it's sort of distracting him from his grief, or, distracting him from having to process the loss of his girlfriend. But then in his surfing of the dark web, he stumbles upon a website where there are videos of people who are still alive appearing to be killed. They're almost like AI generated videos, I guess. And on this website, you can search people's names and then just watch a ton of videos of them being killed in all these different gruesome ways. So he, of course, searches his girlfriend's name, and he ends up not only finding a video of a street camera or a street light camera capturing his girlfriend's actual death of her being killed in a car accident, but then a bunch of other generated videos of her dying in all of these different ways. So that sort of sets him on this quest to figure out who is behind this website, how are these videos generated, how did they get footage of his girlfriend dying, and was his girlfriend's death really an accident? And yeah, I don't know, this was just fun. I don't know, it wasn't anything too terribly deep, but I think it was unique in trying to tackle a main character being corrupted or sort of irrevocably changed by the content that they consume, and how numb you can become to awful, terrible, unholy content the more you subject yourself to it. Somewhere deep in my lizard brain, the gears would have turned, but I wouldn't be able to verbalize it. I've tried to dissect it myself a few times, but it always felt like one of those kitchen cabinets that never opened and seemed to just be there for design. But if you looked closely through the gap in the wood, you could see something made its way in there. Something you forgot about. Something maybe you locked away on purpose. I think we all have stories of odd habits or unorthodox addictions. We find these small things we can plug into the blank spots of our mind that would otherwise be used for grieving and remembering. But then we realize that those blank spaces are infinite, and that this plugging isn't really pragmatic. So yeah, this was a 4-star read for me. It was fun. It was disturbing in a fun way. Okay, the rest of these are in no particular order, so I'm just grabbing from the stack. But next I will talk about The Discomfort of Evening by Lucas Rjineveld, and this was translated by Michele Hutchison. Not to brag, but this was on my 2026 TBR video, so yeah. I am reading some of the books I said I wanted to read. This is about this very isolated Dutch family who work on a farm, and one of their sons ends up dying in an accident, and then we're following the family as they are dealing with, or refusing to deal with, the loss of their son and their brother. And it sort of feels like the parents really just leave the kids to their own devices. And because there's no one guiding them through this incredibly painful grieving process, they're sort of just like becoming corrupted by their grief in some ways. So honestly, kind of similar to Rekt, except instead of having like a main character that is actively trying not to grieve, we're following mostly this young child who is just sort of so overwhelmed and confused by her grief, but like unable to process it because her family is refusing to actually talk about it or acknowledge it or like provide any guidance. So yeah, her and her sister and her other brother all just kind of become corrupted and begin to engage in these more and more perverse acts. And it really feels like as the story progresses, the family is kind of just like rotting and degrading. I will say there is a pretty unfortunate scene where, let's just say I was reading this on my lunch break and I was eating fettuccine alfredo, and I deeply regret that choice. So maybe don't read this while you're eating, because yeah, the kids do some really gross stuff. There's a lot of bodily fluids, poop, pee, constipation, sticking fingers in orifices, you know? So it's gross, it's gnarly, emotionally and physically. Immediately after finishing this, I had a hard time rating it, and I still don't really know exactly where it falls, but I do think I liked it. It just was gross. It was disgusting. It disturbed me. And honestly, it made me really shocked that this won the International Booker Prize, because the Booker Prize panel or judges must have just been a group of freaking weirdos that year. And I'm not upset about that, but I'm just kind of surprised that the Booker would not only consider a book like this, but give it the prize. So I don't know. Take that information as you will. I felt her slippery thumbs in my eye sockets, and for a moment I was afraid she'd press too hard, that my eyeballs would plop into my skull like marbles, and she'd say, "That's what happens when your eyes are always roaming and you never keep them still like a true believer, gazing up at God as though the heavens might break open at any moment." Sometimes I found it strange that you had to pray in the dark, although maybe it was like my glow-in-the-dark duvet. The stars and the planets only emitted light and protected you from the night when it was dark enough. God must work the same way. You can see the impression of a ring around his ring finger. The skin is lighter there. Loved ones always remain visible in your heart or under your skin, the way my chest seems like it will split when my mom sits on the edge of my bed and asks in a porcelain voice whether I love her, and I reply, "From hell to heaven." Sometimes I hear my rib cage crack, and I'm afraid I'll split for good. So yes, did I like this? Tough to say. I think generally, yes, but I am hesitant to recommend this because it is so nasty and gnarly and disgusting. So read it if you want, but proceed with caution and definitely look up trigger warnings. Next is one I recently talked about in my book haul video. That is One or Two by H.D. Everett. So this was published by Mandylion Press, and this is like a re-release of an old book from the 1800s. This is about a woman who she gets word that her husband, who has been on an expedition in India, is going to be coming home in like a week or two. And it's been like years since they've physically seen each other. So she panics and is like, I need to lose weight, because basically she feels like she's not the beautiful woman she used to be when they got married. So she's like, I got to do whatever it takes to lose weight. And she ropes her childhood friend in to help her perform this seance to lose weight. But then it works and she loses weight, but all of the weight that she loses turns into this entity and spirit that, as it spends more and more time on Earth, it gains more and more sentience and begins acting a lot like the woman who wanted to originally lose weight. So when I first picked this up, I was just like, she tries to lose weight and the weight she loses turns into an entity. That's all I need to know. That's like fucking awesome. But this actually ended up being a lot more interesting and nuanced than I thought it would be. So the woman who wants to lose weight, her name is Frances. And when she was younger, her friends called her Fanny. So it's interesting because the entity that is formed from her lost weight begins to not only resemble Frances, but it begins to specifically resemble her when she was younger. So the friend starts calling the entity Fanny. It's just a really interesting exploration because there's really this like split between then how Frances acts and how Fanny acts. And like, you know, you learn more about like, not only did Frances lose weight, but she lost some of her other qualities that are now in Fanny. And I just thought that was really interesting. And I don't know. I just had a lot of fun with this one. It's unlike anything I've ever read. I will say the writing style was a little tough to get into at first. It very much read like a book from the 1800s, although Mandylion Press has done a lot to sort of make it a smoother reading experience. And they have like notes in the beginning explaining that. It just like starts like a book from the 1800s, if that makes sense. I don't know how else to articulate it. But like, I just feel like books from the 1800s all start in such a boring way, kind of. I don't know, I'm generalizing, and I obviously haven't read every book from the 1800s, but if you know, you know. But another thing I really like is that throughout the story, while you're reading, there will be like a little number after a scene that corresponds to a piece of art that is in this like glossary at the end. And Mandylion Press has basically like handpicked all of these art pieces that they think sort of complement the story. It's like the artwork almost acted as like a narrative device, even though it wasn't necessarily like made for the purpose of the story, if that makes sense. Like these are all pieces of art that were made independently of this book, but then Mandylion Press was like basically curating this selection of artwork for the story. And yeah, I just think it's like a cool narrative device. It's so clear they took so much care to choose the artwork, and I just thought it was so cool and so fun. I had such a fun time. Like as I was reading, I was like, oh, when's the next number going to come up? When's the next piece of artwork going to come up? And I was like excited to get to it. So anyway, 1 or 2 by H.G. Everett was really good. It was funny, but it was also kind of bleak at times. I annotated a lot, and it wasn't necessarily for the language. It was more for like, I was just picking up on a lot of the narrative devices and the themes and the metaphors and mostly the character juxtaposition between Fanny and Francis. I really had a lot of fun with. So you could read that one too if you want. Next is one that I'm pretty sure a subscriber recommended in my comments. I really wish I could remember who it was because this was fucking weird. And like, you're weird, but also glad you're here. And yeah, I freaking loved it. So that is Dengue Boy by Michel Nieva. And this was translated by Rahul, Bary. Yeah, this was weird. Weird effing little book. It flies by so fast too because the chapters are so short. I think I read this in just like a couple sittings. I don't even really know how to describe this one. The synopsis is, it tries to really prepare you, but I don't think anything can really prepare you for how absolutely bizarro this book is. It's like so absurd and like over the top. If you're in a place where you're feeling so beaten down by the news cycle and like you're at the point where it's like, if I don't laugh, I'm gonna cry, I think this book might be for you. But it is very weird and gross and kind of raunchy, so I guess also keep that in mind. But okay, let me try to describe this book. We are in the future, 2297. The Earth has been decimated by climate change to the point now where there are corporations who provide these experiences where you can pay money to experience other climates, and like most notably like snow and ice skating and things like that. Like there are these luxury resorts where you can go to experience snow. The ocean, I think, is also like boiling hot, so like you can't even go in the ocean anymore. A handful of international conglomerates rule the world by exploiting this pandemic stock exchange. So I don't know, even after I read it, it was a little confusing, but it's something to the effect of like they basically gamble on like what the next pandemic will be, and then they make money that way. It is just effing weird. We're mostly following Dengue Boy, who, as the novel progresses and he learns more about himself, he changes his name quite a lot, but it's always Dengue something. But it was just so funny. I think within like the first 10 pages, he's like already disemboweled a young boy, so just like strap in, honestly. And yeah, as Dengue Boy traverses the world and is introduced to these people, we learn more about the state of the world and how fucking grim it is. But Dengue Boy is sort of like an agent of chaos and ends up leaving destruction in his wake. And honestly, there's something kind of satisfying about it. After all, wasn't that how mosquitoes had been entering houses since time immemorial, irritating their owners and reminding them again and again that something they believed to be wholly theirs, their own, impenetrable epidermis, was in reality covered with uncontrollable and therefore intolerable forms of life? And the queen thought, I wish I could have a girl who was as white as snow, as red as blood, as beautiful as winter. Dengue Boy, in a moment of revelation that suddenly cast her entire life in a different light, concluded that this girl was not beloved simply because she was white, like snow, or beautiful, like winter. No, The mother so fervently desired this daughter because she was caked in filthy mammalian blood. But yeah, if any or all of that sounds good, you could consider reading Dengue Boy and go on this weird effing ride and then tell me if you like it. Next is The Glutton by A.K. Blakemore. I had kind of a tough time reading this because the author uses so many vocabulary words that I have literally never heard of before. I consider myself to be pretty well read. I think I'm a relatively smart person. So yeah, it just felt like a choice for sure. It really just felt alienating. It kind of felt like the author was like, haha, I'm smarter than you. And it felt very elitist. Like, I only want literature professors to be reading this. And I'm sure that's not the case, but the story was just so good. And I really liked the main character a lot. So I ended up liking this overall by the end of it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess you have to maybe go in knowing like this book might make you feel kind of dumb. But nonetheless, I did annotate a lot of parts that I really liked. The writing was good. I had fun with it. But it just is like a bummer that A.K. Blakemore felt the need to be like, look at all these big words I know, you know? Okay, I haven't even told you what this is about, but we are in 1798 France, and there is this man who is like wasting away. You know, he like looks anorexic, he's like gaunt, and he has a lot of rumors swirling around him that he's eaten people, and he has been labeled a glutton. Like, he'll just eat anything and everything and in large quantities. He is watched over by a nun at this hospital, and she basically like listens to his story of his life, and it's just incredibly sad. I also learned after finishing this that this was based on like a real person. I don't know if it was like a real person or like a real mythical person, you know, like Johnny Appleseed, but apparently there was a person, fictional or otherwise, known as the Glutton of Lion. That is who Terrer is based on. So yeah, he's like born a peasant, so we learn more about his childhood, and then just like the cruelties he's had to endure as a child, and then when he goes out on his own as an adult. And yeah, I don't really give a shit about like 1700s France, the French Revolution, don't care. So I kind of was hesitant that I wouldn't like this, but I really did end up liking this a lot. So that's why it's in this video. The other children do not want to play with Terrer. Never want to play with Terrer. Their mothers tell them not to play with him because his own mother is/was a whore. But the children ignore their mothers and decide not to play with Terrer on their own terms, because Terrer is weird on his own terms. His height might have endeared him to the older boys, if it was not for the mildness of his character, strung along in every timid shift of his bony lineaments, bared in the fallow of his eyes. Terrer does not mind. Terrer's joy in the world is huge and autogamous. Soaking his skinny legs in the stream, he watches the other children cheerfully, the little girls piling stones on the bank, the boys wading midstream to kick sudden rainbows into the sunshine, all their bodies variously hollowed by winter and purpled by father's fists, and feels no real desire to wed his joy to theirs. It is enough. He is enough. So as soon as I read that, I was like, Terrer is a sweet little baby boy who must never be hurt. But I knew, because I read the synopsis, that he was indeed going to be hurt. And that upset me, because that section just did such a great job of endearing me to him as a character. After that, I was like, I would die for Terrer, actually. It would do no good to describe Terrer's pain, which is enormous and in every part of his body. Because in pain we are all alone, latched into the flesh, where the blood whistles and cells knit and unknit themselves. To tell you that the pain fills him like a heavy fire all over his young body would be feeble and perhaps ultimately deceitful. To tell you he tries to open his eyes and finds they will not open would be to pick your pockets of a truth you are likely already in possession of, and perhaps wish to forget that in our suffering, we are all of us totally, irrevocably alone. He's dead, says Terrer, because that is one thing Terrer can do, say what he sees. What he sees is a thing he has never seen before. Friend dead, shot in the head, eyes wide open and bloodshot behind eyeglasses. A small fragment of naked bone gleaming at the temple like eggshell. already the rain washing into the bloody hole in his head. The writing in this is so good, if not a little pretentious at times with the word choice, but I love the story. I love Terraire. So I think you should read The Glutton. Honestly, it's good. Okay, I did save this one for last because this one like knocked me over. Usually after I finish a book and I'm like, oh, I loved that, I have to let it marinate for a little longer before I could commit to saying it's one of my favorite books of all time. But this one just struck me so much that by the end of reading it, I was like, this is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I know that this won't be the case for everyone, but I do think that this has been largely well received on the internet. So that is Rejection by Tony Tulathimutte. We got a couple things to address. First of all, when people were initially talking about this, they said this was a short story collection, which is a little misleading. To me, I think a short story collection are stories that are mostly standalone, and these stories are all intertwined. It's almost like we're getting different points of view of all these characters that are a part of the same story. So I'm kind of kicking myself for being dissuaded from reading this just because I had the impression that this was a short story collection rather than a novel told in stories, if that makes sense. I loved this. I loved this so much. The way I knew that this was going to be an all-time favorite is that there is one section of this that isn't like as strong as the earlier sections, but even that, like that could have been like garbage. It wasn't garbage, but it could have been garbage and I still would have given it 5 stars. Like there was just something about this. It just had that 5-star aura. It had what it takes to make the cut. This was an easy 5 stars. So yes, these are 7 connected stories that kind of cover a wide range of topics, but like it's mostly just like living in modern life, modern dating, incel culture, tech bros, that group chat you have with friends from an old job and you're like not really friends with them anymore, but you still like are part of that group chat because you used to be such good friends with them and like you used to see them every day because you worked with them, but now you don't, so you sort of just are part of that group chat out of obligation. Just sort of like little parts of the human condition, especially like the modern human condition, that you don't really think about, but then when you hear someone else talking about it, you're like, oh my god, I literally have a group chat like that, you know? So yeah, I just think a lot of authors really try to communicate this, you know, like razor sharp, finger to the pulse commentary on modern day living and the modern day human condition. And like it wasn't until reading Tony Tulathimutte where I was like, oh, he is the one he's got it, you know, like he knows what he's doing. He's such a good writer. I'm like speechless, honestly, just like in thinking about this book again. But yeah, the first story is about a guy who is like a self-proclaimed feminist. He's like doing everything right, but he like still can't get women to sleep with him. And it's like him lamenting about that, and then ultimately his descent into becoming an incel and like participating in incel culture. The second story is about a girl who sleeps with one of her guy friends and then she becomes like obsessed with him, even though he very clearly is like, that was fun, but I just want to remain friends. And it's sort of her like descent and like spiral and how she just like cannot let that go. Number 3 is about this gay man who has like intense shame around his sexuality and like his kinks that he's interested in. It's exploring his shame and then ultimately his ability to finally communicate what it is he wants sexually, but it like kind of doesn't go well. And honestly, story number 3 and like his whole like porn fantasy thing, I know a lot of people like had to skim through, but like I think if you just go in, like don't take it seriously. Again, I'm not laughing at him, but it is really absurd and really over the top. Like there's a part where he like in the fantasy is like, I want smoke to come out and like doves to fly out, like when the Pope arrives. Like how are we not supposed to laugh at that, you know? So I think if you maybe approach it with more humor and like, I don't know, just like have a silly, funny, goofy time, it won't seem as raunchy or disgusting, I guess. Story number 4 is about a guy who's like a tech bro who uses like extremely outdated slang like Gucci. Honestly, he's hilarious, but he is dating this woman. I won't say who, but she may or may not appear in one of the other stories, and basically like controlling her whole life. Yeah, that one was funny, but then like the very last line was like a punch in the gut. Story number 5 is kind of hard to describe, but I guess I'll just say it's about a person who is on an endless quest to not be perceived or like assigned any sort of identity by society. That's all I'm going to say about that one, mostly because I don't have the language to do so. You kind of just have to read it for yourself. And then I'll leave the last two for you to read because fifth story and on, it gets like pretty meta and like fourth wall breaking. So I'm gonna let you read that for yourself. This was so effing good though. I did write stuff in my reading journal to try to make this more focused in communicating to you why I liked it so much. Maybe some part of this video can be coherent. Okay, I wrote like 4 pages in my journal because there was like a part of this that just made me feel very deeply seen in a way that like other authors who again are trying to write this sort of like modern human condition don't really quite get. Rejection is not just an online book, it's the online book in my opinion. I've read many books of this variety, like No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, but it wasn't until I read this where I was like, oh, Tony Tulathimutte is online all the time. He is online right now, you know? And I think the term chronically online has become kind of overused because pretty much every Gen Z and millennial is chronically online because we're always staring at our phones. And I think chronically online has become synonymous with just people who are at the forefront of knowing what the most up-to-date TikTok trend and meme and joke is. But these people aren't setting the trends, they're just sort of reporting on them. What I liked about Tony Tulathimutte is that he gave more depth to the concept of being chronically online and kind of showed like how much darker and more diverse this population of people can be. Tony Tulathimutte invoked a lot of subcultures that felt so jarring to me. I was like, oh my God, how does he know about that? You know? And I'm sure that there were so many other subcultures referenced that I didn't even recognize because I'm not a part of those. Honestly, it made me feel, I like looked up when I was reading and I was like, I need to tell someone about this, but like no one is like up to date on what I'm reading and like kind of, it wouldn't matter as much to them. I don't know. It felt like I was like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure finding a clue in like an unexpected place, you know? I was like, is Tony Tulathimutte trying to communicate with me? It really felt like a weirdo freak reaching out to me, another weirdo freak. So the first instance was Tony Tulathamutte's use of the word kayfabe, which is a term from the world of pro wrestling that means the fact or convention of presenting staged performances as genuine or authentic. And while it's not impossible for this word to be co-opted into the literary world, an author would first need knowledge of this subculture, and not even just knowledge of pro wrestling. There are many pro wrestling fans who wouldn't know what kayfabe is. That word is more common among a subpopulation of pro wrestling fans, a subculture of a subculture, if you will, that are not only fans of the wrestling performance, but also the behind the scenes. These are the fans that fall down infinite rabbit holes to learn more about wrestlers as performers versus as real people. This subculture has its own vocabulary, and for Tulathimutte to use that vocabulary in the book to describe a character who is not even adjacently related to pro wrestling felt like a fourth wall break. So after that, I was like, wow, that's kind of weird, but like whatever, I guess Tony Tulathimutte is also a wrestling fan. But then he freaking drops a Neopets reference and a Chris Chan reference. Some of you might know what Neopets is, it's not that niche, but if all of you are like, I don't know who Chris Chan is, yeah, good. Like, that is so niche. And like, I don't even want to know about Chris Chan, but I do. So Neopets alone, I would have just written off like, okay, Tony Tulathimutte is my soul sister, fine. But then the Chris Chan reference was like, it felt like Tony Tulathimutte was like, I know everything you've seen online, you know? It was kind of jarring at first. And I couldn't tell if it was like, oh, this person has also been in all of the same weird corners of the internet that I have, or if it was like jarring in a way that was like, wow, there really are no true original experiences, you know? But I think my final answer is that there is like a sense of camaraderie. It's almost like when you meet someone who's from your home state. I'm a person who does not live in the state I was born in. And it's like if you meet someone from your home state, and especially if they like happen to know your small rural town, there's this sense of immediate camaraderie just because it's like, you know the place that I know. It feels like that, but just the online version. So I don't know. There are very few books that compel me to not only write in my reading journal, but write 4 pages. So yeah, I'm going to say that Rejection by Tony Tulathimutte is one of the best things I've ever read. It's weird. It's raunchy. Like I said, story 3, there is that like porn fantasy thing that might be tough to get through for some people, but I don't know. If you are wanting to read the chronically online book, this is it. Okay, guys, those were 6 books that I read so far in 2026, and I freaking loved so much. I think you should read some of these. Honestly, a lot of these are kind of gnarly, so I don't know. I guess just, you know yourself. So look up content warnings as you need and read if you want, and let me know if you like them. So you can like this video if you want, comment, have you read any of these books? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Would love to hear about the best books you've read so far this year. Let me know. You could subscribe. You could watch my other videos. I'll see you in whatever video I make next. Love you very much. Bye.